Imagine waking up inside a tiny cabin made entirely of dirt and grass. The walls sweat moisture when it rains. Mice crawl through the roof at night. Your husband has just ridden away to buy supplies, and he will not return for 3 months. The nearest neighbor lives 40 miles away across an endless sea of empty prairie. Outside, the freezing wind screams across the plains so loudly it sounds almost human. If you scream for help, nobody will hear you. If you get sick, nobody is coming. If something happens in the middle of the night, you are completely alone. For the pioneer wives of the 1800s, this was not fiction, it was daily life. History romanticizes the Wild West as a land of fearless cowboys, brave explorers, and rugged men conquering the frontier. But hidden beneath that mythology was another story almost nobody talks about. Thousands of women were dragged away from crowded towns and close-knit communities into one of the most psychologically brutal environments imaginable. Endless silence, endless isolation, endless repetition. Many of them spent months without meaningful human contact, trapped in tiny cabins surrounded by emptiness so vast it felt unreal. And over time, that isolation began to change them. By studying forgotten diaries, preserved letters, and 19th century medical records, historians uncovered a disturbing reality. Extreme loneliness on the prairie did not just make people sad, it slowly distorted their minds. Women developed strange rituals, obsessive behaviors, phantom conversations, and in some cases, complete psychological collapse. To survive, they invented desperate ways to fight the silence before the silence consumed them. Number 1. The wind that never stopped. The first enemy was not starvation, it was not disease, it was the wind. The American plains were so flat and open that nothing blocked the powerful prairie gales. Day after day, night after night, the wind slammed against the cabins with a constant hollow roar. It rattled doors, shook windows, and seeped through cracks in the walls. Some women described lying awake for entire nights listening to the endless shrieking outside, convinced the sound itself was driving them insane. In diary entries, pioneer wives often wrote about the wind as though it were alive, not weather, but a creature, a presence, something waiting outside in the darkness. To drown it out, many women developed strange coping habits. Some sang loudly for hours while cooking or cleaning, not because they were happy, but because they desperately needed to hear a human voice. Others memorized entire chapters of the Bible or long poems and recited them repeatedly while pacing their cabins. The words became a lifeline, proof that their thoughts still belonged to them. Because after enough days alone on the prairie, silence stopped feeling empty. It started feeling hostile. Number 2. The brain creates company when none exists. Human beings are not designed for isolation. The brain constantly searches for connection, conversation, and recognition, and when it cannot find those things, it begins creating substitutes. At first, pioneer wives talked to their animals. Cows became companions, chickens became audiences, horses became emotional support. Women shared their fears with livestock because there was literally nobody else to speak to. Some even gave personalities to household objects, greeting chairs, stoves, or lanterns as if they were old friends. But during brutal winters, when snowstorms trapped families indoors for weeks and animals disappeared into barns, the loneliness deepened into something stranger. Women began creating imaginary social rituals. Some crafted dolls from dried apples, cloth scraps, or corn husks and kept them nearby while eating dinner. Others set extra plates at the table for people who were not there. Many wrote long letters addressed to relatives back east with no realistic way to send them. The letters described ordinary chores in obsessive detail because even pretending to communicate with someone helped ease the crushing isolation. In some journals, women described hearing voices calling their names across the empty prairie, only to discover there was nobody there. Loneliness had become powerful enough to imitate human presence. And that was only the beginning. Number 3. Endless work became psychological survival. Pioneer wives discovered something terrifying very quickly. An idle mind was dangerous. The moment chores ended and silence returned, dark thoughts rushed in. Thoughts about death, thoughts about abandonment, thoughts about being trapped forever in an endless landscape where every day looked exactly the same. So they stayed busy constantly, not for productivity, for survival. Women scrubbed floors until their knuckles split open. They washed clothes repeatedly long after they were clean. They swept dirt yards that would immediately become dusty again. They stitched quilts with thousands upon thousands of microscopic stitches, requiring exhausting concentration. Historians now believe these repetitive tasks functioned almost like self-imposed psychological therapy. The intense focus kept their minds anchored to the present moment. Sewing a perfect line or polishing a kettle gave the brain something predictable to control inside a life that otherwise felt overwhelmingly uncertain. The prairie stripped life down to something primitive. Keep moving or collapse. Think about modern life for a moment. Most people today panic when the internet stops working for a few hours. We instinctively reach for phones during moments of silence because constant connection reassures us that other people exist nearby. Now imagine losing all of that completely. No electricity, no music, no social media, no traffic outside, no stores, no distractions. Just an endless horizon and months of isolation stretching ahead of you. How long before your own mind started changing? Because for many pioneer wives, isolation did not merely create sadness, it transformed their relationship with reality itself. Number 4. The dead never truly left the prairie. Death was everywhere on the frontier. Children died from fever. Husbands died in farming accidents. Harsh winters killed livestock and sometimes entire families. And because communities were scattered so far apart, there were often no undertakers, churches, or proper cemeteries nearby. Families buried loved ones themselves, sometimes directly outside the cabin window. The dead became permanent members of everyday life. Women planted flower gardens over graves and sat beside them for hours, talking aloud as if the deceased could still hear them. Locks of hair from dead children were preserved inside lockets or woven into jewelry. Portraits of lost family members hung inside tiny cabins where grieving mothers saw them every single day. Modern psychology suggests these rituals were attempts to maintain emotional attachment in an environment where human connection was desperately scarce. In horrifying ways, the dead sometimes felt more present than the living. A child buried 50 feet from the front door could feel emotionally closer than a neighbor living 40 miles away. The prairie distorted loneliness so deeply that grief itself became companionship. Number 5. Social gatherings became emotional lifelines. When winter finally loosened its grip and travel became possible again, isolated families rushed towards human contact with almost desperate intensity. Quilting bees, social churches, barn raisings. These were not simple community activities, they were survival mechanisms. Women traveled for entire days by wagon just to sit inside crowded rooms with other people. Observers at the time often noted how rapidly pioneer women spoke during gatherings, almost as if months of silence were pouring out all at once. Conversations overlapped chaotically, laughter erupted too loudly, stories spilled out uncontrollably. For a few precious hours, loneliness disappeared. The quilts sewn during these meetings became treasured emotional objects, carried back into isolated cabins. Some women later wrote about wrapping themselves inside those quilts during winter nights, because touching them reminded them that somewhere beyond the endless prairie, other human beings still existed. That tiny sense of connection mattered more than most people today can even imagine, because without it, some minds simply could not endure. Number 6. Prairie Madness. Eventually, doctors across the American Midwest began noticing a disturbing pattern. Pioneer wives were breaking psychologically. Women who once appeared emotionally stable suddenly experienced violent mood swings, paranoia, hallucinations, uncontrollable depression, or emotional numbness so severe they stopped speaking altogether. Some wandered aimlessly into snowstorms. Others abandoned families without explanation. A few reportedly set fire to their own homes simply to interrupt the crushing monotony surrounding them. The phenomenon became so widespread that it earned a name: Prairie Madness. Although modern historians debate how accurately doctors understood the condition, most agree that extreme isolation,